The part of space once known as human territory had been silent for so long that most younger civilizations didn't even believe the stories anymore. They thought it was just an empty region with nothing special about it. But those who traveled through the galaxy often whispered about that area when the lights were dim and the engines were quiet. They spoke softly, as if the stars themselves were listening. They called it the Silent Zone, a place no one entered willingly. And when someone asked why, the answer was always the same. No one knew what happened there, but everyone felt that something powerful once moved through that darkness. Something that still left a mark, even after ages had passed. A lone traveler drifted near the edge of this forgotten region. He wasn't a soldier or an explorer by profession. He simply had a habit of wandering far from busy routes. He liked quiet places where the noise of crowded worlds could not reach him. As he approached the border of the old human region, he noticed something unusual. There were no patrol ships, no warning signs from any government. Yet every ship he passed on the way, cargo haulers, scouts, even illegal traders, had changed course to avoid this area. Some acted like he was foolish just for getting close. This only made him more curious. Space was full of dangers, but most could be explained. Rogue planets, unstable stars, collapsing stations, pirate bases. Everything had a reason behind it. But here, there was no reason anyone could find. Just silence, the kind that felt too deep, too heavy, as if it carried memories that refused to fade. He slowed his small vessel and looked through the viewing window. The stars looked the same as anywhere else, bright points, scattered across the endless spread. Yet something in their arrangement felt different. He felt as if those stars had seen something they still remembered, something they whispered about when no one was listening. He took a deep breath and leaned back, wondering what kind of event could make a whole region stay untouched for so long. The stories he had heard in passing came back to him. Some said the humans once lived there, a species known not for dominance, but for their unpredictable strength when pushed too far. They were described as people who built, explored, created, but also defended with a force that surprised everyone. Others said humans did not vanish. They simply disappeared from sight by choice. They left behind no wreckage, no colonies, no clear traces, just this wide, silent space. He wondered if any of those tales were true. He had never met a human, and neither had most people alive today. If they ever existed in such numbers, they were now more like legends than a real species. As his ship drifted along the border, he noticed faint signals on his console. They were old, very old. Their frequency was strange, almost unfamiliar, as if they came from devices that no one used anymore. The signals didn't form words or warnings. They were like echoes, small, broken bits of something that once had meaning, but now hung like distant shadows. He leaned forward and adjusted the scanner. The signals grew a bit stronger, but they remained faint, like someone speaking from behind a thick wall. They carried emotion, though, something heavy and tired. He thought maybe they were distress calls, or maybe messages left behind during some old emergency. But they didn't match any pattern used for distress. They felt more like someone was murmuring to themselves, too quiet to understand, but too sorrowful to ignore. He suddenly felt a chill, even though the temperature inside his vessel was normal. It was the sensation of being watched by something you couldn't see. Not in a threatening way, just in a way that made the silence feel more alive than it should be. He stared at the dark expanse beyond the border. Nothing moved. No engines, no lights, no structures. Only space. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something was still there, hidden under layers of time. He decided to record everything. Not because he thought he'd discover anything grand, but because he felt this experience meant something. He spoke into the recorder, describing the silence, the avoidance by other ships, the strange signals. His voice sounded softer than usual, almost as if he didn't want to disturb the quiet as he continued to drift. He remembered hearing older travelers talk about this region. They said that long ago, fleets tried to move into human territory, thinking the humans were weak and scattered. Those fleets never returned. Not even debris came back. No one knew if they were destroyed, lost, or simply erased by something no one understood. After that, no one dared to test the borders again. The traveler didn't fully believe those legends. But now, near the border, he understood why they existed. There was something deeply unsettling about a region, so quiet that even pirates refused to hide in it. He turned off the engines and let his ship glide forward gently. The silence outside seemed to swallow even the small hum of his vessel. He listened carefully, hoping to hear another signal, something clearer. After a few minutes, a soft pulse echoed through his console. It wasn't dangerous. It wasn't strong. But it felt intentional. He recorded it, played it back, slowed it down, sped it up. It still made no sense. It wasn't language. It wasn't music. It wasn't warning. It was something else, something that felt like a memory replaying itself over and over. A memory too old for anyone to claim. He realized then that the stars in this part of space might really remember something. Maybe not in a magical way, but in the way old ruins whisper about the people who once built them. Space carried traces. Gravity, radiation, tiny fluctuations. All of them held stories, if someone knew how to read them. And he felt that this region held the traces of a moment so intense it changed the space itself. He wondered what kind of event could linger like that. Was it a battle? A disaster? A weapon? Or something more peaceful but powerful? No one had answers. And as far as he could see, no one even tried to find them anymore. Civilization after civilization simply accepted that the place belonged to the past. A past they didn't want to disturb, but the traveler felt drawn to it. Not in a reckless way, but with the curiosity of someone who wanted to understand. The galaxy was full of mysteries, but this one felt personal, as if humanity's absence had left more questions than their presence ever did. He stood up and stretched, looking again at the border. There were no lines, no markers, just an invisible divide recognized by everyone. He wondered if humans had ever meant to create such a barrier, or if it formed on its own after whatever happened. As he sat back down, he thought about how strange it was that a species could vanish so completely. Most species left ruins or artifacts, but humans left mostly stories, and even those were fading. Some people thought humans were peaceful, learning species who traveled with curiosity. Others described them as unpredictable protectors who defended what mattered to them without hesitation. But nearly all stories agreed on one thing. Humans never started conflicts, but they ended them with such finality that no one wanted to provoke them twice. He wondered if that was why this region stayed untouched. Maybe the galaxy still respected the memory of those final moments. Or maybe they feared repeating a mistake. As his ship continued drifting, he noticed that space felt slightly different ahead. The stars looked dimmer, not because of distance, but because something in the space between them felt thicker, almost like a soft veil. He didn't cross into the region yet, but he felt its presence pressing lightly against his thoughts. He reached for the controls but paused. A feeling settled in his chest. Not fear, not excitement. Something like recognition, even though he had never been here before. As if this place carried a story that wanted to be found, but patiently waited for the right moment. He took a sip of water and closed his eyes for a moment, letting the hum of the ship fade into the background. The silence of the region lingered around him, gentle but firm. It felt ancient, older than any station or fleet still active in the galaxy. He imagined countless ships passing by over centuries, each choosing not to cross the border, each adding to the quiet weight of the place. When he opened his eyes, the faint signals flickered again on the console. They were brief, almost shy, as if the space itself was whispering, testing whether he was listening. He leaned forward, unable to look away. He whispered a few soft words, asking for nothing specific, just letting the space know he was listening. It was a strange thing to do, speaking into empty space, but it felt right. For a moment, everything was still. Then another faint pulse appeared. This one carried a bit more rhythm, almost like a heartbeat slowed by time. He didn't know what it meant, but he knew what he felt. The region wasn't empty. It wasn't abandoned. It was resting, waiting. Remembering that, he sat back and let out a long breath. The silent zone was not just a story told by old travelers. It was real, and it carried a presence stronger than any recorded history. He didn't know what he would find if he entered, but he knew he couldn't turn back now. Something in that quiet darkness had reached out to him, and he felt he owed it his attention now. And so, with steady hands and a calm breath, he prepared to cross the border, unaware that the truth behind this silent territory would change everything he believed about the past. The traveler spent some time sitting in his small vessel, thinking about the strange signals and the quiet feeling of the region ahead. The border of the old human territory felt like a wall built from memories instead of metal. He had always heard stories about this place, but now the stories felt too small compared to what he was experiencing. The silence had weight, and the faint pulses coming through his console felt like a message lost in time. He wanted to understand more, so he opened the recorder again. He spoke softly, describing how ships avoided this region. He explained that the signals felt like old voices from a past that refused to fully disappear. His tone stayed calm, but his thoughts were moving fast. He wanted answers, and he hoped the recordings or history files he collected would help him find at least a few. He opened the storage section of his vessel, pulled out a small device, and connected it to his console. It held fragments of old data he had gathered during his travels, pieces of information from abandoned stations, old markets, and forgotten libraries. Most of the files were damaged or incomplete, but sometimes even a broken sentence could reveal something important. He searched through the files until he found one labeled Human Era Recovered Records. When he tapped it, the screen flickered for a moment, then showed a list of short recordings. Many had red marks beside them, showing corruption or missing sections. But a few still played. He tapped the first one. A grainy voice spoke, the sound crackling as if traveling across a long distance. The speaker described an old alliance meeting where various civilizations discussed human expansion. The tone of the speaker was cautious, almost nervous. The humans in the recording were portrayed as explorers who kept to themselves, but who also reacted strongly whenever someone tried to push them around. The traveler listened carefully, replaying the recording twice. He didn't hear any threat in the speaker's words. Instead, he heard uncertainty, like someone warning others, not because humans were dangerous without reason, but because no one fully understood how far humans would go to protect themselves. He opened another file. This one was worse in quality. Static filled most of the clip, but a few sentences were clear enough to understand. It described a failed attempt by a group of civilizations to take human systems by force, thinking the humans were too scattered to resist. The recording mentioned that the fleets entered human territory, but never returned. The traveler sat back, staring at the screen. The recording didn't sound exaggerated. There was no dramatic tone in the narrator's voice, no attempt to make the humans look mystical. It simply stated what happened. The attackers vanished. He wanted to know more, so he tapped the third file. This one started with a soft humming noise before a calm voice spoke. The person described humans as builders, people who created learning centers, outposts, and peaceful settlements across various systems. The speaker said humans believed in exploration more than conflict. But the recording ended right when it started describing a major event. an event that was supposedly the beginning of their disappearance. The screen turned black, and a message appeared, "File incomplete." The traveler sighed. This was the problem with ancient data, never enough to form a complete picture. Still, these fragments told him something important. Humans weren't known for seeking power. They traveled, built, and defended. They didn't go looking for trouble, but they didn't run from it either. He sat quietly, thinking about what the last complete recording had said. The humans reacted only when someone tried to take what was theirs. And when they reacted in a way no one expected. He turned off the recordings and looked through the window again. The silent region ahead seemed even more mysterious now. What kind of conflict would lead to the disappearance of entire fleets without leaving any trace? And why would humans need to vanish after defending themselves? He tried to imagine how humans lived. What kind of people were they? Were they emotional? Brave? Stubborn? The recordings showed them as determined and protective, but words in an old file could never tell the whole truth. He wondered what their faces looked like, how they spoke, what their worlds felt like. No one in his time could answer that. Humans had become stories shared around dim stations and long journeys. As he drifted near the border, his console beeped again. This time it wasn't a faint pulse, but a small recovered transmission. It was damaged, but clearer than anything else he had found. He tapped the screen. A shaky image appeared, half static, half picture. It showed what looked like a pilot's seat and panels filled with warning lights. The voice of a tired officer spoke over the noise. Unknown fleet entering outer human space. They think we are unprepared. They think we are weak. They don't understand. We warned them. We told them not to cross the line. The recording glitched for a moment. The screen went white, then returned for a few seconds. They won't stop. They don't listen. So they will learn. Not because we want this, but because they forced us to stand. The screen cut again. When the image returned, it showed a bright flash behind the officer. The sound that came next was deep, almost painful to hear, like something massive tearing through the air. The officer's final words were almost a whisper. This is not a war. This is the final warning. For everyone. Then the recording ended. The traveler sat frozen. The tone of the officer was not angry, not hateful, just tired. Someone pushed to a point where words no longer mattered. He replayed the recording 3 times, listening carefully each time. The message was simple. Humans had warned others. They tried to avoid conflict. But when their space was invaded, they responded with something powerful enough to make fleets disappear. But what was that final warning? A weapon? A defense system? Something else? He looked out at the border again. The space seemed calm, but the calmness now felt like the quiet after a storm, not before one. The kind of quiet that comes when too many voices have already been silenced. The traveler felt a strange mix of fear and respect. It wasn't fear of humans themselves, but of the unknown event that took place here. The recordings didn't explain how humans disappeared afterward. No one knew if they left by choice, or were taken by their own creation. He wondered why people didn't try to study this region anymore. Maybe they feared waking whatever had ended the fleets. Maybe they respected the humans' final message. Maybe the quiet was enough to keep everyone away. He reached for the controls to take his ship closer. But before he could start the engine, another thought crossed his mind. Maybe the humans had one last message. Maybe the faint pulses he heard in Part 1 weren't random signals. Maybe they were the final pieces of a story the galaxy had forgotten. He activated his deep scan systems. His console showed weak traces of old communication waves. Not dangerous, just ancient. They drifted like dust in sunlight, soft and slow. He recorded them carefully, knowing even small details could help him understand As he worked, he realized something important. The stories he had heard all his life were not exaggerated. Humans were not mysterious because they wanted to be. They became mysterious because no one dared get close enough to find the truth. The traveler leaned back and closed his eyes for a moment. He felt the weight of history around him. The border didn't feel like a warning meant to scare people away. It felt like the last boundary of a chapter that no one finished reading. He opened his eyes again and studied the silent darkness. This wasn't just empty space. It was a memory frozen in place. A memory of people who lived, fought, and vanished without leaving behind a single answer. He wondered if the old transmissions still moved through the region, bouncing between debris or dust, replaying themselves endlessly. He imagined a voice calling out across centuries, hoping someone finally heard the plea or message it carried. He checked his engines and prepared to cross the border. He didn't know what he would see inside. He didn't know if the silence would break or deepen. But he felt something pulling him forward, something that felt like unfinished truth. With a calm breath, he set his course. The recordings had shown him enough to know that this story was bigger than rumors. And he wanted to understand it. Not for glory, not for discovery, but because some stories deserve to be heard completely. As the edge of human territory approached slowly, he whispered to himself that whatever happened next would not just change his understanding of humans, but perhaps the galaxy's understanding as well. And with that quiet promise, he prepared to enter the region where the stars still murmured their secrets. The traveler took a slow breath as his ship drifted toward the unseen border. There was no line drawn in space, no glowing fence, no wall of light. Yet he felt it. The same way a person feels when they step from warm air into cold air without touching anything. The space ahead felt heavier, like a room where someone had cried long ago and the air still remembered. He checked his controls again. Everything was working. Engines stable, shields normal, scanners active. Nothing unusual. Nothing dangerous. Yet his chest felt tight, not with fear, but with the sense that he was crossing into something sacred, something the galaxy had avoided for generations. He eased the ship forward. The moment he crossed the invisible threshold, his console flickered. Not violently, just a brief shiver, like waking from sleep. The screens returned to normal almost immediately, but the traveler knew something had changed. The silence inside the region was different from the silence outside. It felt deeper, more thoughtful, as if the space itself was listening. He looked out of the window. The stars were still there, but they looked softer, dimmer, as if they had been watching something for so long that their light had grown tired. A gentle haze drifted across the two. Empty space, almost invisible, like dust that remembered movement. It wasn't frightening. It was. "Sad Dot," he whispered softly, not sure why he was whispering, "I'm here." His voice sounded too loud, even though it was barely above a breath. He turned back to his console and noticed a few weak signals blinking on the screens. They were old, maybe centuries old, repeating the same patterns. He ran a scan, but the results came back unclear. The pulses were not warnings. They weren't messages. They were like heartbeats, slow, fading, but steady enough to be felt. He leaned forward and tapped a new scan mode. This one examined old gravitational marks left behind by massive objects. The readings surprised him. Something enormous had once moved through this region. Not just one thing, many. The marks were layered, like footprints left in soft ground by different travelers over time. He adjusted the sensors, and more shapes appeared. They weren't natural. They were too organized, too precise. The traveler realized they were traces of old human stations, vessels or structures that once filled this region. But now, nothing remained. Not even broken pieces. It was as if everything had been lifted gently away rather than destroyed. Curiosity grew inside him. He pushed the ship deeper into the region. The silence grew thicker, but nothing threatened him. He felt something strange, something he couldn't explain. It was almost like the territory was studying him, wondering why a traveler had entered after so many years. As he moved a little further, a small blinking light appeared on his radar. He tapped the screen and zoomed in. It was an object floating quietly in space. At first he thought it was debris, but as he came closer, he realized it was something else. A buoy. Old, worn, rusted around the edges. A human-made warning buoy, still drifting exactly where it had been left centuries ago. Its lights were faint, flickering, but still alive. It spun slowly, like a tired guardian who never abandoned its duty. The traveler approached slowly, careful not to disturb it. He activated his external microphone and listened. The buoy emitted a soft repeating signal. It wasn't a threat or an alarm. It was a simple message, old and gentle. Do not enter, for your own safety. The voice sounded like an old recording, calm and steady, not angry, not demanding. More like a caretaker giving advice to anyone who passed by. The traveler felt a chill. Humans had left this warning not to protect themselves, but to protect others. Whatever happened here long ago wasn't something they wanted repeated. He circled the buoy, studying it. The material was strong, built to last centuries. Humans must have known the region would become dangerous after their final act. They didn't abandon it. They protected it, even while leaving. The traveler moved on, deeper into the heart of the region. More faint signals appeared, small bits of energy, old radio waves, soft gravitational echoes. He followed them like stepping stones. The space around him changed slowly, becoming more still, almost frozen in memory. A strange glow appeared in the distance. At first, it looked like a reflection, but as his ship approached, the shape became clearer. It was a massive ring-like structure, silent and unmoving. Not metal, not stone, something else entirely. Something smoother, built with a material the traveler had never seen before. He gasped softly as the structure came into full view. It was enormous, larger than any station he had seen. Yet it floated so quietly, it felt like part of the natural sky. He slowed the ship and stared at it. There were no markings, no lights, no weapons. It was peaceful, serene, like a monument built for silence. He scanned it. The results confused him. The structure was dormant, but not dead. It held power, old power, deep inside. Power that felt patient. He spoke into his recorder again, his voice trembling slightly. I've found something. Something ancient. Something human. His own words surprised him. He realized he had said human with respect, not curiosity. This place had that effect. The deeper he went, the more he felt like humans had not disappeared. They had simply left behind a story too big for anyone to understand. The ring-like structure drifted quietly, untouched for ages. It didn't respond to his scans or movements. But as he circled around it, he noticed small marks along its surface, dense, dark patches, dense, dark patches, signs of conflict. Not destruction, just memory. As if the structure had seen a battle and survived it, he wondered what kind of power could damage something built so strongly. Then he wondered what kind of power could protect something like this. He followed the signals again. They led him further inward. The space grew even quieter. His own breathing sounded loud inside the ship after a long stretch of silent drifting. He saw something in the distance, a faint shimmer, like heat rising from a road. As he approached, the shimmer became clearer. It wasn't heat. It was light, thin, and floating, like threads weaving through the darkness. He passed through them slowly. They flickered as his vessel brushed against them, almost like soft memories breaking apart and forming again. He didn't feel any danger, just a strange warmth, like walking into a room filled with old stories. He realized these shimmering lights were remnants of energy traces of an ancient event, the kind that never truly fades. He reached out and placed a hand on the window, feeling a strange pull. Something had happened here, something powerful enough to bend the fabric of space, something that carried emotion, fear, courage, sorrow, determination, all woven together. He whispered, "What did you do? What did you face?" The shimmer didn't answer, but the quiet around him grew deeper, almost thoughtful. He kept drifting until the signals grew stronger, more rhythmic. They felt like a pattern now, not random. He recognized the same pulse he heard at the border, but louder. A slow heartbeat. It wasn't a machine. It felt like a memory of humanity itself. The traveler's eyes softened. This wasn't just forbidden space. It was a grave, a monument, a quiet chapter of history that refused to disappear. He moved forward gently, respectful of the silence. Every moment felt heavier, fuller, as if he were walking through the halls of a forgotten city. He began to understand something important. The galaxy feared this place, not because of the human strength, but because of what happened when humans were pushed too far. The silence wasn't a threat. It was a reminder that some battles should never be forced. A reminder that some warnings should be respected. A reminder that humans once stood here, fought for what mattered, and paid a price no one could measure. The traveler drifted on, his heart steady, knowing he was getting closer to the truth. Somewhere in this silent region, the final piece of the story waited for him. Something the galaxy had avoided for too long. He whispered softly, "I'll find it." The silence around him felt almost like an answer. The watcher moved deeper into the zone where humans once lived, and every step felt heavier than the last. The silence around the old territory was strange because it was not empty. There were sounds, faint ones, like pressure shifting in the air or dust sliding across ancient metal. The place felt awake, as if it remembered every detail of the past and watched every visitor who dared to enter. Even the machines on the watcher's suit picked up signals that did not match anything modern. Each signal came for a second and disappeared, as if something was testing the intruder and pulling back. The watcher tried not to show any fear. He kept his breathing steady, but inside, questions kept hitting him. Why did this place disturb even the bravest explorers? Why did every species avoid it, even though nothing had been seen here for ages? Why did the stars whisper warnings about humans? He had studied history for years before deciding to come. He had read about the last days of human expansion, the moment when they sealed their borders and told all other species to stay away. No one knew the reason. Humans were powerful, but they were not cruel. They traded, they shared knowledge, they built peaceful connections. So why had they pulled back? Why had they vanished from the galaxy? As he walked, broken structures came into view. At first they looked like ruins of buildings, but when he came closer, he realized they were not buildings at all. They were some kind of old reactors, their shapes unfamiliar. They were made of smooth plates and strange curves that didn't match modern engineering. They still hummed with a faint vibration. When he touched one, the entire structure gave off a low echo, like a giant heart still beating under layers of quiet stone. The watcher stepped away. Even though he couldn't explain it, the machine seemed aware. He caught himself whispering sorry under his breath. As if he had entered someone's house without knocking. The ground suddenly shifted under him. Not a huge quake, just a slow movement, like something enormous adjusting its weight deep underground. He steadied himself and looked around. Something was changing. The air felt warmer, as though the territory knew he was there. He continued walking until he reached what looked like an old human city. But it wasn't a city in the way others built cities. There were no roads, no tall towers, no sharp geometry. Everything was arranged in circles and flowing shapes. almost like the structures had grown out of the earth instead of being built on it. The surfaces were smooth and shining, even after so many years. None of it matched anything he had seen in historical records. As he stood in the center of the silent city, something soft brushed past his mind. Not a sound, not a thought, but something like a memory that wasn't his. It felt like someone was trying to speak, but the voice was too old, too distant. He closed his eyes and tried to focus, but the feeling slipped away. He opened his eyes and noticed something glowing at the far end of the circular plaza. A faint light pulsed slowly, as if breathing. He hesitated. Everything in him said leave it alone. But everything he had ever wanted to understand was hidden in this place. So he walked toward the light. As he got closer, the ground beneath him seemed to soften, almost like it welcomed him. The glowing object was a sphere floating above a stone pedestal. It wasn't a machine or a weapon. It looked more like a memory container, something humans might have left behind. He reached out his hand, not touching it, just letting himself feel the warmth coming from it. Then his vision blurred, and the world around him faded. The plaza disappeared. The city disappeared. Even the sky felt like it melted away. He wasn't unconscious. He was inside something. Or something was showing him a memory. He saw a time long before humans vanished, a time when they were still present in the galaxy. They stood in this very place, but it looked different. It was bright, alive, full of movement. And the people weren't afraid. They were working on something large, something hidden beneath the ground. The Watcher could not see the exact shape, but it was huge and powerful. The people were activating it, not as a weapon, but as a shield, a boundary, something to protect what they loved. He saw their faces, calm, determined. They weren't hiding. They weren't running. They were preparing something the galaxy had never understood. Then he saw shadows in the sky, shapes rushing toward the human boundary. Not enemy ships, but something else. Something ancient. Something that existed long before any species knew how to travel between stars. The shapes had no clear form. They looked like storms made of living matter, spreading across space. The humans didn't panic. They activated their creation. The ground lit up, the air shifted, the city glowed. And the storm creatures stopped, confused, as if they sensed something stronger than them. Then the memory cut off. The Watcher stumbled back, breathing hard. The sphere dimmed again. The ground felt stable, but his heartbeat wasn't. He tried to process what he saw. Humans hadn't left because they were defeated or afraid. They left because they had faced something so old, so powerful, that even the stars whispered warnings about it. And they didn't fight it with weapons. They built a barrier, a stronghold, a shield that needed silence and distance to remain stable. But then a new thought hit him. If humans created a barrier meant to keep something ancient out, then why was the zone reawakening now? Did the shield weaken? Were the storm creatures returning? Or had the humans returned themselves? He took a breath and steadied his hands. He needed to see more. He needed to understand everything before leaving. But as he prepared to continue, the ground gave another slow, heavy shift. This time, the vibration didn't fade. It grew. Steady, deep, almost like footsteps. The Watcher slowly turned. In the distance, something massive moved between the old structures. He could not see its full shape, only flashes of metal reflecting faint light. The sound was too heavy to be any normal machine. He froze. The stories he heard when he was young came rushing back. Stories of human guardians left behind. Machines that only woke if someone crossed the line. Machines that didn't attack, but warned. The sound grew closer. Not fast, not angry, just steady. It wasn't rushing toward him. It was announcing itself. Then it stepped into view. It was tall, towering above the ruins. Its design was smooth, curved, ancient but flawless. Not a weapon, not a soldier. More like a sentinel, something meant to observe and decide. Its eyes, if those glowing shapes were eyes, settled on him. He expected fear to take over. But something strange happened instead. The sentinel lowered its posture slightly, almost like a bow, acknowledging him. That small movement told him everything. It recognized him as a visitor, not an enemy. It recognized that he came without intention to harm. Humans had built machines that could read the heart more than the weapon. He whispered, unsure why, but the moment felt like it demanded honesty. He said he wanted to understand what happened, and he did not wish to break anything humans had left behind. The sentinel stood still. Then the lights across its body pulsed. The ground under the watcher lit up with soft patterns, spreading outward like ripples. It wasn't an attack. It was an invitation. The watcher swallowed hard. He realized he had passed the point of turning back. Whatever humans had protected, whatever darkness they had kept away, whatever truth they had buried in silence, he was now close to uncovering it. The sentinel stepped aside, opening a path that led deeper into the Forbidden's territory. The stars outside this place still murmured warnings. But the watcher now felt something different. He felt that the story of humans wasn't over. They weren't gone. They had simply chosen silence to protect the galaxy. And now, for reasons unknown, their silence was beginning to break. The watcher followed the giant sentinel, each step feeling heavier than the last. The ground lit up under the sentinel's feet like it remembered every path it had ever taken. The watcher walked slowly behind it, trying not to show fear. Still, he could not help but feel that every wall, every silent stone, every old machine was watching him back. The air grew warmer as they moved deeper into the Forbidden's territory. Small sparks drifted in the air like dust with light trapped inside. The watcher reached out to touch one of them, and it passed through his glove like it wasn't fully real. It felt like warm air, nothing more. But he could tell it meant something. Everything in this place meant something. The sentinel stopped in front of a huge structure, half buried under the ground. It looked like a mountain at first, but then the watcher noticed smooth lines, shining plates, and huge circular doors. This was not a natural structure. It was a human creation. But it was nothing like normal buildings. It felt alive in a different way, almost like it breathed with a slow rhythm. The sentinel stepped aside, giving the watcher a clear path. For a moment he just stood there, unsure if he had the right to enter. Who was he to walk into something humans had hidden so carefully? What if he misunderstood their purpose? What if he triggered something he could not control? But curiosity was stronger than fear. He took a long breath and stepped forward. The doors opened without him touching anything. A soft wind came from inside, warm and calm, like the place was welcoming him. The light inside was gentle, not bright, but enough to see. The walls had glowing lines that moved slowly, as if the building carried energy through its body. He walked deeper inside until the hallway opened into a massive chamber. And what he saw there made him forget to breathe for a moment. At the center of the chamber, floating above a broad circular platform, was a shape so large and so silent that it felt like it had been sleeping for 1,000 years. It was not a ship, not in the way the galaxy understood ships. It was larger, smoother, more curved, shaped like something between a vessel and a living creature. Its surface looked like metal at first, but the way it reflected light felt too soft, too organic. The watcher stepped closer, staring at the huge sleeping form. He had studied human technology for years, but he had never even imagined something like this. This was not a machine for travel. It was a machine for protection. He could feel it even without touching it. It radiated quiet strength. The floating shape suddenly pulsed with a soft light. The entire chamber responded, glowing brighter for a moment. A soft hum filled the air, so gentle it felt more like a breath than a sound. The watcher froze. Something was waking up. The sentinel behind him lowered its head slightly, almost like showing respect to the sleeping giant. The watcher felt his heart beat faster. He did not know whether he should run or stay. But the giant did not move aggressively. Instead, it raised a slow, steady glow around itself. Then something strange happened. The watcher felt a voice, not in his ears, but inside his mind. It wasn't words. It wasn't a language. It was a feeling, a message made of emotion. It felt like 1,000 memories reaching out gently. He staggered back, but did not fall. The voice was not angry. It was curious. Humans had left something behind. Not just machines. Not just technology. They had left a memory, a presence, something that could still think in its own quiet way. The watcher whispered, unsure why, but the moment demanded honesty. He said he came to understand, not to take anything, not to break anything. He only wanted to know the truth. The light inside the giant pulsed again, this time slower, calmer. The voice in his mind grew clearer, still not words, but more focused. It showed him images, memories of a time long before humans vanished. He saw humans standing in a chamber like this one, their hands resting on the giant's surface. They were calm, steady, ready for something difficult. They were activating the giant. They were preparing to face the ancient storm that the galaxy never understood. He saw the storm again, the strange living matter that moved between stars. Humans weren't just fighting the storm. They were creating a barrier to protect every species, even the ones who would never know what happened. Humans had made a decision. To keep the galaxy safe, someone had to be the wall. Someone had to stand between the storm and everything else. And humans chose themselves. He saw them leave. Not in fear. Not in anger. But with quiet determination. They sealed their territory, not to hide from others, but to hide something dangerous from spreading. They created the silent zone so the barrier could work without interruption. As the memories faded, the watcher realized something important. The giant was not just a machine. It was the heart of the human barrier. And now it was waking up because the barrier was weakening. The watcher's breath trembled. The silence of the stars wasn't a warning about humans. It was a warning about what humans had kept away. The giant slowly lowered until it hovered only a few steps above the platform. Its glow softened. The watcher felt one last message from it, clearer than the others. The barrier was breaking. Time was running out. Someone needed to warn the galaxy. The watcher felt a chill run through him. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a leader. He was just an explorer. But he understood why he was the one who entered this place. Humans had chosen him not because he was powerful, but because he walked with respect. Because he listened. Because he didn't come to take anything. The giant slowly drifted back up, settling in its silent rest again. The chamber dimmed. The voice faded. The sentinel stepped forward, standing tall again. For a moment, it felt like the sentinel was watching him not as an intruder, but as someone who had been trusted. The watcher backed away slowly, giving a small nod of respect before turning toward the exit. The path lit for him again, step by step. Everything in the Forbidden's territory seemed calmer, as if the place had spoken its truth and could finally rest again. Outside, the sky felt larger, like the universe had changed. The watcher took one long look at the sentinel, who stood at the entrance of the ancient structure. The giant machine gave a small tilt of its head, almost like a goodbye. The watcher whispered a promise. He said he would carry the truth to the galaxy. He would tell them what humans had done. He would warn them about what was returning. He would make sure the silence of humans wasn't misunderstood as abandonment. And then he began the long walk back to his ship. The Forbidden's territory remained behind him. Quiet as ever, but now he understood why. The territory wasn't cursed. It wasn't dangerous for no reason. It was a shield one built with sacrifice, one that protected the galaxy for 1,000 years, without asking for thanks. As he left the zone, his ship picked up familiar star signals again. The outside world felt louder, brighter, but also more fragile than before. He knew the galaxy wouldn't believe him easily. Stories about humans always sounded too big, too dramatic. But he also knew he had no choice. The storm creatures were not gone. The barrier was fading. The stars were murmuring again. Someone had to be the messenger. Someone had to speak before it was too late. As his ship lifted off, he looked one last time at the quiet world behind him. He understood now why humans disappeared. They didn't vanish. They transformed into guardians the galaxy never saw. And now, after centuries of silence, their final message had been delivered.